Welcome back to part 2 of why Gen Z is misunderstood at work, and today we're getting personal. Not personal to me, but personal to everyone.
Everyone?
Everyone!
In part 1, we talked about how managers complain that Gen Z isn't technologically capable and that they lack communication skills. But those complaints are about aptitude, not attitude. The complaints we're talking about today come much closer to just being personal attacks, but they are unfortunately still very common among managers. The big ones are that Gen Z is lazy, entitled, and a giant mess of mental health issues. Let's start with the lazy and entitled complaint because those two are basically just the same thing. There are many reasons behind these complaints. Gen Z want better pay, more perks, more flexibility with their hours, remote work, and so on. But what many are calling laziness or entitlement are really just a shifting of priorities. There has always been a trade-off, real or perceived, between stability and freedom. A demanding job may ask for a lot of your time, diminishing your freedom and flexibility, but in return it pays you more money, providing you greater financial stability. Starting a business means you have no financial stability, but you're the boss. So technically you're free to do whatever you want. That's a wild oversimplification, but it works as a basic example. For many decades, there was a lot of focus put on the traditional safe path. This meant graduating from high school, going to college, perhaps getting an advanced degree, getting a job in your career field, and then working at that job until you're 65 and retiring with your 401k. At this point, Gen Z is very disillusioned with the safe path. They've realized that the safe path isn't safe at all. The cost of a college degree has skyrocketed, and most salaries have not even remotely kept up with inflation, especially recently. But more importantly than the inflation and the costs of college, Gen Z has realized that the stability promised is an illusion. In November of 2022, Meta laid off 11,000 employees in one day. 13% of their total workforce gone. 5 days later, Amazon laid off another 10,000 workers. And these aren't just part-time minimum wage jobs. These layoffs affected people who had worked there for years, people with degrees and experience. Managers, directors, vice presidents. Gen Z has realized that having a job right now doesn't mean you're going to have a job next week. So they are no longer willing to trade as much of their freedom for perceived stability. My friend and workforce expert Joe Moll published a book called Employalty in 2023. Joe is well known for making people better bosses. So when they saw the title Employalty, many thought that it was about how to make your employees more loyal, but it is actually the exact opposite. It teaches employers how to be more loyal to their employees, because that is a large part of this issue. Gen Z, as a whole, doesn't trust their employers. The reason quiet quitting became a thing, the reason Gen Z wants flexible hours, remote work, and higher wages is because they've decided that for many of them, the trade-off isn't worth it. They aren't willing to compromise their autonomy because they don't believe in the stability the employer offers. This is compounded by the current economic situation. Many young people feel fairly hopeless about the economy. With inflation soaring and the cost of living through the roof, many have given up entirely on things like owning a home and are pretty dubious about retirement.
No retirement for you.
Many are putting off serious relationships, marriage, and children because they aren't sure they can provide for themselves, let alone for a family. And as a generation that is more risk averse in general, that isn't a risk they're wanting to take. The future is uncertain in so many ways, so they're more interested in enjoying the present, and not necessarily in the just go out and party way that you might be imagining. In fact, most studies show that Gen Z is partying, whatever form that takes, less than previous generations. Teenagers are drinking less, doing less drugs, having less sex, and doing all of the things that people generally criticize youth for doing. No, their version of enjoying the present is quite different. For example, young dads are spending 3 times as much time with their children as previous generations. They're prioritizing family, friends, self-care, and hobbies. They are much more inclined to follow a strict view of employment, where you pay me to do the thing, and I go do the thing. The end. They're less likely to buy the whole, "oh, our company is like a family" line. They aren't going to make sacrifices for the good of the business. Many of them don't want to go above and beyond, get noticed, or climb the corporate ladder. And that ties into a few other trends. One reason that people don't care about climbing the corporate ladder as much anymore is because there is way more job hopping. Many younger employees don't see a lot of upward mobility in their jobs. And since they're less invested in the company, they'll jump jobs frequently to secure better pay, benefits, training, or opportunities. Right now, one of the fastest ways to get a raise is to just quit and get another job, with the average job hopper getting a 15% pay increase when they switch. Let's be honest, most employers aren't handing out 15% raises very often. Most of the complaints about employees being lazy or entitled really boils down to the idea that these employees aren't as loyal and dedicated to the company as I want them to be. And that's true, they aren't. As an employer, you can either accept that you're going to have less loyal employees, or you can make changes to earn that loyalty. Again, if you want an in-depth version of how to earn that loyalty, go check out Employalty by Joe Moll. I will put a link in the description. Not a sponsor, it's just a great resource. The last topic that's related to these loyalty complaints is that Gen Z has side hustles. And it is true, nearly half of Gen Z have a full-time job and are working a side hustle as well. The main reasons are that people need money. And people also have hobbies and passions. If you can make some money with your hobby, that really helps in the current economy. They also serve as a backup plan. Again, people don't trust their employers, so a side hustle can give you a little bit of security if you get laid off. For employers, there are 2 ways that you can handle the side hustle issue. Option 1 is that you encourage them. Side hustles help employees develop new skills and expand their potential. They are basically free training the employee wants to take that you don't have to pay for. At my last workplace, almost everybody had a side hustle, and the company was so supportive. The employee that had a small food business would be hired, separate from her salary, to cater company events. The photographer would be hired to take the company photos, and they backed the Kickstarter for my wife's first novel at a fairly high level. This is a huge win-win, because it shows the employee you care about their talents, that you appreciate them. It gives them more reasons to stay working with you, and it allows them to be open and honest about their side hustle. Because if an employer makes side hustles taboo, says that you aren't allowed to have one, they're still gonna happen. They're just gonna be secret. If the employer supports the side hustles, they'll always know what's going on because people will be honest about it. The other option is to create jobs that are fulfilling, engaging, allow people to tap into their skills and passions, and pay well. If the job does all of those things, then people probably won't be drawn as much towards side hustles. They won't need them. That's quite a challenge for some jobs, which is why I am very pro side hustle, as long as it doesn't interfere with a person's prior commitments. That should take care of all of the Gen Z misconceptions about laziness or entitlement. But what about mental health? Reports from managers indicate that there are a large amount of younger workers with depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges that make them harder to manage and work with. This is related to the cliche that kids these days are just delicate flowers that don't know how to handle adversity, which is shockingly close to the truth. There's no denying the stats. Gen Z has massively increased rates of anxiety and depression. Like, way more. Nearly half of all young people state that they have a mental health problem. This is what's called a problem of progress. As societies advance and they eliminate problems, they start tackling and sometimes even creating new ones. Compared to the old problems, the new problems are much smaller, which is good, but they don't feel smaller because we never lived the old problems. For example, parenting is stressful, but given that about 100 years ago, 10% of all babies died before their first birthday, you would think that parenting would be less stressful now that that number is down closer to about 1%. But it isn't. It's still stressful. So older generations see younger generations complain about their problems and they think, wow, you have no right. Things were so much worse when I was young. And they're probably right. But that doesn't help at all. And some of the problems that we've solved as a society have created new ones that are likely responsible for the mental health crisis. Now, there are books and essays of research covering this, so I'm just doing the 30,000-foot view here. But one of the issues is that we have made the developed world incredibly safe and relatively easy, especially for children. And research indicates that kids need to do scary, risky, and difficult things in order to develop the skills they need to handle adversity at a young age. So when a young employee gets told that they're too delicate and that they haven't learned how to handle hard things, statistically, they're right. But that isn't the young person's fault. It's their parents or teachers or other adults in charge who never let them have formative, challenging, or sometimes even dangerous experiences. There are a few people who disagree with that research, but it is fairly widely supported. There are some other theories on the cause of the mental health crisis that are a little less concrete, but still have a lot of merit. For example, there's quite a correlation between poor mental health outcomes and having a smartphone at a younger age, as well as a strong correlation with social media use. Some people argue that these are false or spurious correlations, like the idea that video games caused violence, which proved to not be true. It's hard to know, and the research is still developing. The point is, yes, Gen Z has more mental health challenges than previous generations, but those are mostly due to external factors, things that they didn't have a choice in. Cultural beliefs about parenting at the time that Gen Z was raised, the technology that they were exposed to at a young age, and even the isolation created by both technology and the pandemic are contributing factors. As long as they are capable of doing the job, mental health shouldn't be treated any differently than any other health issue. Employers need to make reasonable accommodations. Can you imagine if managers were saying, "Ah, man, all these employees keep getting cancer because they lived around lead paint and asbestos as kids"?
Attention! If you or a loved one was diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation.
What weak pansies. Never hire them. That would be insane. This shouldn't be a big issue, but the employees also need to still do the job and get the proper care that they need to do so. Really, Gen Z is not mysterious or all that different from every other generation. They can make just as amazing of employees. They just prioritize themselves and their families more than their job, which I'd argue is a good thing. And they don't trust companies to have their best interest at heart. And who can blame them? If you want to make your Gen Z employees more productive, successful, and committed, you're going to have to start by earning their trust. And if every company became worth trusting, well, that would make the world a much better place.